Welcome back to the Generally Spooky History Podcast, your place for the deep dive into Scotland's myths, ghouls and legends. Ghouls? We don't do a lot of ghouls.
No, I don't think we've ever used the word ghouls in an intro or about us before.
Nope. We're just the ghouls. We're just hanging out.
Ghouls night.
I'm Kieran. I am the co-host. I will be listening to the story the same as you. And my lovely wife, Eilidh, is over there. And she has done all the work, all the research, all the scripting, and will be telling us a story today.
I know, I have to research, write, and then present.
Mm-hmm.
You're the person in the group in the school project who just turns up on the day and hopes that they don't cock it up in front of everybody.
What part am I saying? What did you prepare? I didn't prepare. What? Just give me something to say.
What bit am I saying? What do you mean you didn't print it out for me? What have you been doing this whole time?
What have you been doing?
That noise is Odin. He's chewing. We can't get him to stop.
Yep. Our beloved dog mascot, cable manager, and general arch nemesis. Mine, anyway.
He's chewing louder now.
Gonna have an aneurysm.
We're back. Another episode.
Yes, indeed. Into something to do with Scottish history, and that may or may not involve ghouls.
I don't really know where you're getting that from.
I don't know.
Where did you learn that word?
Oh, I think I meant to say grizzly, and I got to G
didn't.
and then just said a different word.
I meant to say this and didn't.
Yeah. Story of my life, really. It's how we do around here at Generally Spooky.
It's how you do.
Yes. You are very prepared, and I'm also here.
But part of the brief for your job on the podcast is to be unprepared. So really, you are prepared.
Frankly, I'm nailing it.
Because you're doing exactly what you're supposed to do.
Everyone else needs to just keep up with me. That's what I'm hearing.
Keep up with you.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Because by being unprepared, I am in fact the most prepared. Because no one's more unprepared than I am right now.
You're the best at what you do.
Thank you. Unreplaceable. It's like the Tenacious D song. So, are you prepared to wake up at the crack of noon and go, okay, it's gig time. What t-shirt am I going to wear?
Well, do you want me just to dive in?
I think we should. Otherwise I'm going to start singing Tenacious D, and that's not why the people are here.
They'll go to Tenacious D for that.
Yes, I think we're all eager to hear what we're going to cover today.
Well, we need to play the music.
Well, we better do that first.
Have you done this before? Pretty wild story this week. I won't lie. I'll give you a little warning here that we're going to be talking about a lot of medical stuff this week. Some of it gets a bit gnarly. So if that bothers you in any way, I don't think this is going to be the episode for you.
Interesting.
Join us next time. We'll love to have you. Just, if those things bother you, I would maybe give this one a miss.
Yeah. Can you be audibly squeamish? At least we don't have pictures.
I think so. I think you absolutely can be audibly squeamish.
Yeah, that's fair.
100%. So yeah, if you are audibly squeamish, I would maybe give this one a miss. And if you continue, you've been warned. Proceed with caution.
Excellent. Also, gnarly. That would have been a better word than ghouls.
Yeah, would have been.
What are you going to do?
I mean, we can't possibly go back and re-record it, Kieran. That would be nonsense. We can't just say it again.
Where's the charm in that? Well, I'm excited. I mean, I'm not audibly squeamish, so I'm on board. And I'm prepared, as long as I don't have to look at the pictures.
I don't have any pictures.
Thank God.
And we're talking about historical events, so there are no photographs.
Excellent.
Not that I would be showing you them anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to ask me what we're talking about this week?
Oh, my apologies. What are we talking about this week, Eilidh?
This week, we're talking about the experiments of Andrew Ure.
Oh, Andrew Mai?
It's going to be a long episode.
I've not heard of him, unsurprisingly.
Well, actually you have.
Oh?
We're going to get into it later. You do know that name.
Ooh. There's a flicker of recognition.
Mm-hmm.
Something to do with Strathclyde University?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting.
So you have seen, you do know this name.
Mm-hmm.
You probably don't know who he is. I had no idea who he was. Kieran and I both went to Strathclyde University in Glasgow.
Mm-hmm.
We will get to that later.
Oh, I never know anything. Oh, I'm so excited.
I'm actually going to need some of your help later this episode.
My help.
Yes.
Okay.
The person I'm talking to.
No, the listeners' help.
No, I mean, they can help me, but it'll have to be after the fact.
Okay.
You're the only one in the room. I know there's microphones between us, but I'm still talking to you.
You can, in fact, see me.
Yeah. And you can see me talking to you.
Yeah, okay.
I was looking at him, but talking to her. Because we're going to get into some physics chat later.
Hell yeah. I'm excited. I'm ready.
Okay, let's set the scene. An anatomy theatre in Glasgow University's School of Anatomy. In 1818, just over 200 years ago. It's November, just after 4 p.m. The sun is just about to set. It's cold. There's a bitter chill in the air, and a fire is crackling in the middle of the theatre to keep all the spectators that have gathered warm. But it wavers and shifts as it burns, casting sinister moving shadows on the walls of the already dark room. Those sitting the furthest away from the floor can only just see what's happening far down below them. There's a long wooden table and a large armchair. A respected surgeon, Professor Jeffrey, appears before the crowd dressed in a white surgical gown, accompanied by his assistants and Andrew Ure, a professor at Anderson's institution, which was a rival medical school to Glasgow University.
Oh, okay.
They've all gathered today as colleagues, not rivals, united in a common goal. They're about to try and bring a man back from the dead.
Oh my god. They're going to Frankenstein this bad boy. Oh no. Yeah. Oh, this should be fun.
A hush falls over the crowd as a body is soberly taken into the theatre by members of law enforcement. It's placed on the table, centre of the room.
Mm-hmm.
It's the body of a man, fairly young, strong-looking, definitely dead. The white hood is taken off his head and the bindings are cut from his hands and feet. This man, Matthew Clydesdale, was a convicted murderer. He's just been cut down from the gallows at the new jail, which sits on the edge of Glasgow Green.
Oh.
Only minutes away.
Oh, right.
Jeffrey and his other men, they're all men, pull Clydesdale off the table and place him into the armchair, where he seems to be sitting quite comfortably.
Okay, I expected onto more of an operating table type situation. In an armchair. It's so casual.
Some of the audience members start squirming because he seems to be sitting ready to address them, and he's even looking directly at a few of them.
Oh.
A tube is put inside one of his nostrils. He doesn't mind. The other end of it is attached to a large stack of discs, metallic and ominous. That's the battery, according to the experts below. The battery is also connected to a large set of bellows. The audience doesn't say a word as the bellows begin to move, powered by the battery, to start forcing air into Clydesdale's lungs.
Oh.
To their horror, he draws a breath.
Ooh.
His chest heaves upwards, his body filling once again with air. Another tube is put inside his other nostril, and Clydesdale breathes more and more deeply. The audience in the darkened theatre become more and more uneasy as the experiments continue, each one more confusing to follow than the last, but the results are more and more startling. Andrew Ure is hard at work, pursuing his scientific interests to their grisly end. Clydesdale's tongue begins moving of its own accord. His eyes snap open, staring in surprise at the people staring surprisedly back at him. His head moves round. His arms and legs begin to animate, and to everyone present, he looks as if he's going to stand up from the armchair.
Oh my god.
He doesn't manage it, though. But then, Clydesdale lurches forward. He is standing of his own accord before them all.
What?
The audience begin to lose their composure. Is this man dead? He was hanged just over an hour ago. It defies all logic and belief that he could be standing before them all now. His neck was broken.
Ugh.
He had been left to hang for an hour after the drop to be sure that no life remained. Yet, here he stands. Some of the audience start to scream. Several drop to the floor in a dead faint. It's Professor Jeffrey who comes to his senses first, whether out of propriety, religious duty, or pure revulsion. He grabs a scalpel from the collection of surgical instruments present and strikes at Clydesdale's jugular vein, hoping to fell the already dead man. Clydesdale was a large man, but Jeffrey's blow takes him to the ground, quote, like a slaughtered ox on the blow of a butcher, unquote. He doesn't get up again, and everyone in the silent theatre watches on, wondering, did that really just happen?
Oh my god. Oh. Well, that's terrifying. And creepy. And what the fuck? Grim. End of episode, guys. Thank you for joining us. That's all I can take for today, so I will see you next week.
Well, that's exactly the reaction I wanted, which is nice.
Yeah. Yay.
What do you think?
I think that sounds like something out of a horror film. I have a lot of thoughts. Did they pump him full of like helium?
I'm going to say we will answer questions, but I won't answer them right now. Otherwise, it will render the whole episode
Yeah.
moot. But you can ask your questions.
Well, did they fill him with helium? They just pile him full of so much electricity it started vibrating? Morally? The hell were they doing? You know? And if they had brought him back to life, would they have hung him again? That's what I want to know.
That's the question.
Because he was a criminal, but it's that technicality you've talked about before, where no, he got hung until he died. So he has served his sentence, even if he got brought back to life.
We're going to talk about that later.
Oh.
That exact dilemma.
Interesting. Well, I'll let you continue.
Well, to understand what Earth unfolded on November 4th, 1818, the truth of what unfolded that day, and why, we need to go back further than the 1800s.
Okay, I should have seen this coming. It's like the castles all over again. Are we going back to the year 7?
Pretty much. We're actually going back earlier than that.
Oh, that's what I get for being silly.
Yeah, but now I feel silly. Since ancient Greece, humans have wanted to understand how the body works, how we're built, how we're constructed and put together, and what we're powered by. Ultimately, I think we've always been interested in where we came from, and I think this is an extension of that. And it drives a lot of exploration into how the human body works. You want to figure it out?
Yeah.
Around 400 BC, it was believed that the soul and the heart were one. They were together. The soul was what, quote, enabled the body to think and feel pleasure and pain, unquote.
I see.
So it was a tangible part of your body. It wasn't an idea. It was in there, and it was attached to your heart. Your soul and your body were linked. Your soul was what powered your body and gave you life. If this theory does come from the philosopher Empedocles, like I believe it does, from my research, which is not professional, then you should know that he was a staunch vegetarian. He was one of the first to challenge the idea of animal sacrifice and eating animal meat generally in ancient Greece.
Damn.
He was the first to develop the idea of the universe being made up of 4 elements: earth, air, fire, and water.
That's cool.
That was this guy. But he took it further and suggested that they're all pulled together or pushed apart by love and strife. So love brings the elements together and strife drives them apart.
That's so interesting.
One of the myths about his death was that he threw himself into Mount Etna, the volcano.
That's a way to go.
Either believing that he was immortal, so he would be fine, or just to make people think that he hadn't died, he decided to make himself vanish.
Oh,
so made himself immortal
yes. Oh, smart.
because he wouldn't find a body.
Mm-hmm.
But the volcano spat out one of his sandals, which ruined the whole thing.
Those pesky updrafts.
Mhm.
Ooh, there's something very, like biblical about that.
Mhm. So yeah, he either thought he would be fine and threw himself into a volcano, and wanted to just make it seem like he was living forever,
Mhm.
so threw himself into a volcano.
Bold. Greeks and Romans had some strange ideas.
Yes, they did.
It's funny, with a more modern lens, to see how they were so close and yet not quite there on so many like theories about how things work and stuff.
You can understand it. And remember, this is 400 BC.
Exactly. They were crazy advanced.
2,500 years ago.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty good.
Alcmaeon of Croton, who studied under Pythagoras,
Oh,
don't you know, was, quote, an early pioneer and advocate of anatomical dissection,
interesting.
unquote. Born around 510 BC.
Mm-hmm.
And he was working around the same time as Empedocles. So he's one of his contemporaries-ish. Now, it was through his dissection of animals that he came to the conclusion that the soul must be in the brain, not the heart, because he discovered all of these channels that led up to the brain.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Now, he didn't have more specific details or names or words for these channels,
Mm-hmm.
but you can see how things are beginning to form.
Well, yeah, when you just have to observe the thing and then be like, this is what's happened. And then you make it fit your almost like belief system.
Mm-hmm.
That's so interesting.
Hippocrates was also around at this time, and it was him that said, quote, maybe getting ill has nothing to do with bad luck. Maybe it's caused by having an imbalance between blood, black bile, yellow bile, and phlegm.
See, it's so close. So, yeah, it's not about luck. That's so astute of you. It's about this other thing. Like, I thought you were getting somewhere. So close.
But even then, you have to take that step to get to where we are now.
Yes.
Because the only hope for modern medicine is to move away from, you're ill because God has cursed you, to you have a physical condition that we can look at. So it's an important change, even though it doesn't really make sense to us.
I forget where I read it, but someone said either about science or medicine, I suppose it's kind of both, that half of everything we know is wrong, we just don't know which half, which is frightening but fair.
Yeah. I think it's always healthy to at least believe you're probably wrong.
Have a healthy dose of skepticism.
I think so.
From Skepticles.
It's because of Hippocrates that some modern day doctors still take some version of the Hippocratic Oath.
Oh, I got there like seconds before. I was like,
You saw where I was going.
Yeah.
There's lots of different versions I learned when I was researching it, and it changes from place to place, country to country. But many doctors take the physician's pledge, which is in the Declaration of Geneva, as their oath.
Oh, okay.
Which I do have here if you'd like to hear it.
I would love to hear it.
This is not me taking a medical oath. This is in quotes.
Witness.
This is not me taking an oath. Quote, as a member of the medical profession, I solemnly pledge to dedicate my life to the service of humanity. The health and well-being of my patient will be my first consideration. I will respect the autonomy and dignity of my patient. I will maintain the utmost respect for human life. I will not permit considerations of age, disease, or disability, creed, ethnic origin, gender, nationality, political affiliation, race, sexual orientation, social standing, or any other factor to intervene between my duty and my patient. I will respect the secrets that are confided in me, even after the patient has died. I will practice my profession with conscience and dignity, and in accordance with good medical practice. I will foster the honour and noble traditions of the medical profession. I will give to my teachers, colleagues, and students the respect and gratitude that is their due. I will share my medical knowledge for the benefit of the patient and the advancement of healthcare. I will attend to my own health, well-being, and abilities in order to provide care of the highest standard. I will not use my medical knowledge to violate human rights and civil liberties, even under threat. And I make these promises solemnly, freely, and upon my honour. Unquote.
All sounds good. A very noble oath to take. The one that surprised me is keeping the secrets of the dead. Didn't know that was going to be part of it. So if someone gives you a deathbed confession, you just have to carry that.
I think so. But then this oath is voluntary, so I don't know how that would factor if you were like subpoenaed for something. I don't really know.
Well, yeah, but just not the hard and fastness of it, but that's what you're agreeing to.
Got you.
Whether you do or don't. I'm sure people break oaths all the time. But
Well, I mean, I have some things to say about not differing how you treat a patient depending on their gender, because I've had a lot of problems with doctors where that has been exactly the case.
Yes.
But we're not here to talk about that. It's pretty serious stuff.
Yeah. That's intense.
But the oath itself, the idea of the oath, not these words, comes from the times of Hippocrates.
That's super interesting.
Yeah.
That it is so old. I have a note for the blether.
Just on the subject of doctors being shitty because I'm a woman.
Yep.
Because I'm mad about it. I once had Shark Week so bad I thought I was going to pass out and fall over, and the doctor had the gall to tell me I had an ear infection.
Yeah. That was bad. Had to take you to like an out of hours, like 11 p.m. appointment.
I thought I was dying. It was awful.
And that's what you got told.
He told me I had an ear infection and that's why I felt dizzy. Left the room before I did, and then he was in the car park before we had even left.
Mm-hmm.
Raging. Still mad about that.
That was not good.
I'm still mad about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have some feelings on that generally.
Mm-hmm.
But Hippocrates. It was in the 3rd century BC, so that's 300 to 200, that it was discovered signals were sent between the brain and the muscles of the body by nerves.
Cool.
That's how long ago people figured that out.
Damn, that's insane.
Can you imagine discovering that? No one knew that's how it worked.
Yeah.
And you figure it out.
How would you even discover that? I don't know.
I'm going to tell you.
Oh, well, I would love to hear.
Or at least a little bit. Erasistratus is the one who came upon this discovery.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't fully understand how nerves worked. He could just see that that's what was happening.
Mm.
And we'll see this a lot as we keep moving forward, that people see what's going on, but they attribute the reason for it wrongly.
Mm-hmm.
He believed that these signals that he was observing were spirits that moved around the body along the nerves. So the nerves were hollow.
Oh, okay.
And it was spirits.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He helped found an anatomical school in Alexandria.
Very cool.
And possibly helped found all of neuroscience and physiology.
Well, that's quite awesome.
Because he discovered how nerves work.
Yeah.
And he also discovered that human hearts human hearts have valves.
Oh, wow.
And work like a pump.
That's crazy. Oh, there's such gross imagery thinking about how they were finding these things out.
Well, yes, he discovered all of this because he was one of the first people to dissect a human body.
Yeah.
Which is how he learned all of this.
Mm-hmm. That would have been hard to get permission of from the consul, whoever ruled Greece.
Well, yeah, he was in Alexandria at this time.
Mm.
But yeah, that's the overarching problem we're going to encounter a lot this episode.
Yeah.
Is morally, is that right?
Well, what you doing? What you doing, though?
But yeah, he discovered all of that.
Damn.
So you're looking at the cardiovascular system then too, and how the heart runs the body.
Mm-hmm. Mental.
Mhm.
Absolutely mental.
Erasistratus was widely criticised, not just because he carried out dissections.
Yep.
He also carried out vivisections.
What's that?
It's a dissection on a living body.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Can't be doing that.
Yeah, he did.
Oh, but you can't be doing that, though.
He did, though.
But you can't.
But he did.
Can't be doing that, though.
He did, though.
Oh.
He did. He was allowed to do this. He was allowed to perform vivisections on criminals
It's got to be criminals.
during his time in Alexandria, but it wasn't taken very well, as you could imagine.
Yeah.
So he had the permission, but the public were just like, fuck that. You're not doing that anymore.
So don't worry. I'm just going to try and see your heart before it stops beating, just to see what it looks like in action.
Yeah. This is why I gave the warning at the start,
Mm-hmm.
because we're talking medical gnarliness this week.
Yeah. It's like a human version of I forget what goes wrong, but something can make a cow really sick, where they have to like
oh, yeah.
chop a hole in the side of it to help it.
I think it like release gas doing that.
I have no idea what it's for, but they put like a plug in because they need to get back in over time before they like seal up the hole. And that helps the cow. It's not something they
Well, yeah,
do
that's
for
a
fun.
medical procedure that keeps them healthy,
Yeah, but
carried out by professionals.
I don't imagine Erastus
Erasistratus.
was that careful.
I mean, careful in terms of what he's trying to record, but he didn't really have to be
No.
that careful.
I'm going to try and change this man's chest cavity with a piece of glass so I can see what's happening. I've had 8 attempts and it's not working yet, but I'm hopeful. Oh.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So he did a lot, but he also did some pretty terrible things.
Yeah.
180 AD, so it's nearly 500 years later,
Mm-hmm.
Galen dissects the human spinal cord and discovers that blockages in that cord have an effect on how we move and sense what's around us.
Ah. Try not to dwell on how we'll find that out.
Yep.
Interesting. Very smart.
He was a doctor for the gladiators who were fighting in Pergamon, which is now
Okay.
Turkey.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
So even though he wasn't allowed to dissect the dead,
Mm-hmm.
he got a pretty good idea what was happening under the skin because he had to learn how to help them,
Yes.
how to mend their wounds, and
Yeah.
they were pretty severe.
If you've had someone who was just fighting a lion, you have to learn quickly, won't you?
Yeah, gladiator wounds were often serious and gory
Yeah.
if they were treatable at all.
Mm-hmm.
Galen went on to become the court physician for Emperor Marcus Aurelius himself,
Oh.
and then Emperor Commodus.
Commodus? That's what I've always said.
It just looks like commode. Why?
Mm.
Why would you choose that as your name?
I don't know. Because you want people to sit on your throne for hundreds of years.
When people sit in your face. Both these emperors died of the plague,
Mm-hmm.
the Antonine plague,
Mm.
which is also referred to as the plague of Galen,
Oh, okay.
because he was so familiar with the disease. It's because of his descriptions of the plague that modern-day doctors believe that the Antonine plague was actually smallpox.
Oh, interesting.
Although they're not 100% sure.
Mhm.
They're just going off his notes and what
Mhm.
he wrote. But yeah, imagine having the plague named after you because you're so good at treating it.
That's preferable, because it could very easily have gone, he brings the plague.
Mhm.
He's always there when the plague is there.
That's true. Yeah, because you call me.
Yeah. That's what the example I've been trying to remember. All the we know it's this thing, and we're treating it, and it's working, but not for the reasons we think. With the plague in Britain, with the plague doctors with their big long coats,
Mm-hmm.
that they thought it was, I can't remember why they thought it was, but it was keeping off the fleas, and that's why they didn't get the plague, even though they didn't know that's why they didn't get the plague.
Well, yeah, they thought it was airborne.
Mm.
That's why they had the masks.
Yeah,
They were stopping it from making contact with the skin as well.
but it was actually the big coat keeping the fleas off.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't BC.
No.
So.
Galen also discovered that there was a difference between the blood you find in veins and the blood you find in arteries.
Oh.
This is going to be a good basic biology lesson if it's not something you've learned about before.
Well, yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's a difference. We know now it's because of how our circulation works
Mhm.
that, yeah, there's a difference in the blood that each carries. So the blood in your veins is deoxygenated.
Mm.
The blood in your arteries is oxygenated.
I see.
So it looks different.
Is that why it's kind of blue,
Yes.
like in your hand and stuff?
Yes.
And that's it, deoxygenated.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So it's generally darker if it's deoxygenated and
Mm.
it's more red if it's oxygenated, I believe. But I could have that wrong.
I'm not a doctor. I've not taken the oath.
What? You lied to me.
Oh, the truth comes out.
So yeah, he figured that out, that there was a difference
Yeah, that's cool.
between the two. He guessed at a different thing about what was happening with the circulatory system that was all wrong.
Mhm.
But he was on the right track in seeing that the two types of blood vessel, carried different types of blood.
That's so interesting. So why is that? Oh, well, this one's done by fairies.
Well, yeah. It's been so interesting doing the research for this episode because, a lot of this, I'm trying to say it in just a paragraph, but I had to really get into how it works and what they thought.
Mm-hmm.
Super interesting.
That is really interesting.
So this was around 180 AD, like I said. It wasn't until the mid-1200s that, I'm going to say this wrong, I do apologise, Ibn al-Nafis in Damascus
Mm-hmm.
was able to explain pulmonary circulation. And all that means is how blood circulates the body, getting oxygenated and making your body work.
Oh, okay. Mhm.
He figured all that out.
Cool.
But it wasn't until the 1200s that he did that.
Oh, okay. Wow. A long time later.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting.
Right?
Mm.
In the 1500s, in Belgium, Andreas van Wezel started using Galen's work to learn more about anatomy.
Wow.
It's like 1,000 years later.
Yep.
Or more than that.
This guy was on to something.
Because there was a long time of no one in Western Europe being able to read the texts that were left behind from the Roman Empire.
Oh, okay.
There was a dark period, dark
Yes.
ages, where people just couldn't read it.
Mhm.
The language had been lost, so they had to be redeciphered. It's different when you look further east, when you get to like the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantines, they didn't lose the knowledge in the same way that
Mhm.
Western Europe did. It differs from place to place. Andreas van Wezel went by Vesalius, which was the Latin version of his name.
I see. His alias was Vesalius.
That's a good one.
Thank you.
And he was a professor at the University of Padua.
Hmm.
He had a deep interest in anatomy. Apparently, he stole a skeleton from a gibbet to study how it all worked.
Oh, it's taking it a bit too far.
Yeah. But he started out translating Galen's work so that more people could access it. Because remember, I said for a long time, no one really knew how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So he changed that.
Fair
And
play.
it was pretty massive.
That is massive.
Vesalius was another anatomist who was given permission to dissect the bodies of criminals after they've been
Mhm.
executed.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping you can see the pattern I'm trying to create here.
There are some similarities here through the ages.
By the time he was 30, he had published his great work, which was called On the Fabric of the Human Body, when you translate the title.
Mm-hmm.
It was published in 7 volumes.
Oft.
Now, I'm 30.
I was just about to say, that is good going.
And I thought I was doing a pretty good job with this episode.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found out about this dickhead.
Mm.
And I'm like,
Come on now. There's a thing with theoretical physicists where all the greatest ones across time released their greatest work in their 20s, and then it's just like a decline after that. So it's like almost like a joke that after you're 30, you're just like a washed up as a theoretical physicist.
that's so sad.
Yeah. I mean, they make very good careers for themselves as like lecturers and stuff, and many of them do have more ideas, but like Einstein's theory of relativity and stuff like that were all in their 20s, and then everyone's just like, oh, so what are you going to do next? I'm like, well, was that not enough? Come on now.
One of the things that Vesalius is known for, as well as translating Galen's work, was the fact that he managed to disprove some of Galen's theories.
Oh, okay.
And his work was kind of relied upon. He was the standard for medical practice.
Mm-hmm.
So what he wrote was taken as fact for a very long time.
Mm.
So the fact that Vesalius has come in and said, nope, this is wrong, was massive.
Mm-hmm.
He proved that Galen had based a lot of what he had said about human anatomy. He'd based it on dissections he'd done on Barbary apes.
Oh.
Not the human body.
Oh, okay. What's a Barbary ape? It's just a species.
I think so. I will double check. A Barbary monkey.
Mm.
Used to be called the Barbary ape, but it's actually a monkey.
Oh, okay.
They're quite small.
I want to say that's what the monkey from Friends is. He's a macaque,
Similar, yeah, based on the photos I'm looking at.
I think.
But yeah, he'd done dissections on them, not humans, and had then translated what he'd found to apply directly to humans.
I mean, it took 1,000 years until anyone challenged him, so.
Well, Vesalius proved that Galen was wrong by showing that there weren't veins, quote, in the human ribcage where Galen had said they would be, unquote.
Oh, interesting.
So it was a big deal.
Yeah, that is a big deal.
And he still really admired Galen, but had proved him wrong to advance medicine.
Yes.
Now, Vesalius was the one that discovered all the blood vessels in our bodies come from the heart. Because previously it had been thought that all the blood vessels in the body come from the liver.
From the liver?
Yes.
Strange.
It's another major discovery.
Yeah. But then I only think it's strange because I know it's not true. If I didn't know anything and someone told me that, I'd be like, oh, cool.
Right.
Yeah.
In the 1600s, after Vesalius,
Mm-hmm.
William Harvey discovered lots about how the heart and blood vessels work. He was the one who realized that blood vessels operate one way.
Oh, okay.
So blood only flows in one direction.
Uh-huh.
And ultimately created a more accurate theory about circulation.
Mm.
And it was also Harvey who suggested that there was a fixed amount of blood in the body at all times, which people hadn't thought before.
Oh, yeah. That does make sense.
Yeah, they thought that you had to consume things to, I think, create more blood, and you had to let blood out.
Oh, yes. Bloodletting.
But he's the one who suggested, no, you have the same amount of blood in your body all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's standard. And here's how it flows through everything.
Ooh.
You say, oh, but it's just how the body works.
Well, that's true. Ooh.
Now, I'm explaining all of this to kind of chart medical exploration through the years.
I like it.
Because it was a mission over hundreds and hundreds of years that had been building up for such a long time. It was hugely important. And the characters of our story were part of this.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted to leave their own mark on it, just like all these people had done.
Mm-hmm. Their own shit smear on time.
I mean, I know it's nuanced and tricky, but I don't think it's a bad thing.
No, perhaps not. But I'm anti desecrating bodies without permission.
Well, I mean, me too, but that's not what I'm saying. In 1745.
Jacobite Rebellion.
Yeah, well done.
Thank you.
Ewald George von Kleist accidentally invented, quote, the electric amplification bottle,
Oh, okay.
unquote,
Interesting.
when he was experimenting with how electricity moves through glass.
Mm.
Through the 1700s, there was a growing interest in understanding electricity and how it could be harnessed.
Mm-hmm.
So this is happening alongside all this medical advancement and research.
I think these two things are going to come to a head.
Really? With his bottle, von Kleist learned that it was possible to store an electric charge,
Oh, cool.
which hadn't been done before.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of take that for granted now, but he managed to do it.
Mm.
Although he did get a really bad electric shock when he accidentally touched the bottle that he had rigged up for his experiment
Yep.
to learn that it had stored a charge,
I was just wondering how often that happened.
because he hadn't meant for it to happen.
No.
And you can look into his experiments if you're more interested. I'm not going to get into the ins and outs because it's confusing. But yeah, he gave himself a hell of a shock. After this came the Leyden jar, which was invented by Peter van Mussenbroek.
Not Mr.
I
Lee.
said that flawlessly and I'll hear nothing different.
That's what I heard.
Mussenbroek?
Not Mr. Leyden.
No. The Leyden jar, I think it was at the University of Leyden, or it was in Leyden. That's where the name came from. I don't have it written down. I'm pretty sure that's where the name came from. But this jar was able to store electricity. So he'd advanced the bottle, created the Leyden jar, but you could connect a bunch of Leyden jars together to create
A battery?
a battery, a very early battery.
When you put it on the spot and you worry you're going to get it wrong.
No, you're fine.
I got it.
1780.
Before
What?
we go to 1780.
What?
Well, because it's a jar, I just imagine that you can just keep it in the cupboard. So you...
In the pantry.
Yeah, so I was like, oh, I'm making toast. Do you have any jam? Like, oh yeah, it's in that cupboard, but careful which jar you touch. What do you mean? So that's my jar of electricity. I've got that for just in case there's a power cut.
It's my jar of sparks.
Oh yeah, jar of electricity is a boring name. We need a cool name.
Spark jar.
Spark jar. Lightning jar.
Lightning in a bottle.
We've caught it. Thanks, Mr. Leyden.
He wasn't called Mr. Leyden. He was Peter van Moostenfinen.
Flim, flim, flim.
1780.
Yes.
Luigi Galvani was doing experiments on dissected frogs, trying to discover how their nervous systems worked. So we're coming back to this. They're still trying to figure it out. They still don't really know.
Yep.
Kind of by accident, he discovered when you applied electricity to the frog's nerves, their legs twitched.
Okay.
This was not widely known.
Yep.
And it just kind of accidentally touched the specimen. And it happened. And him and his students in the room were just like,
What the hell was
the
that?
frog just moved.
Hmm.
So, discovered galvanism.
Okay.
Quote, the generation of electric current by chemical action.
Ah, yeah.
Unquote. I read into the experiments and exactly what happened and what they involved and what they were doing. And it's very confusing. So all you need to know is this is galvanism, applying electricity to a dead specimen.
Yep.
And there's movement.
And it goes...
Kinda, yeah. That's all we need to know for our story.
Yes.
But feel free to look into it. Live your life.
Mm-hmm.
But his experiments raise the question, are we powered by electricity?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Because you're applying electricity to something dead and it starts moving again.
Mm-hmm. It's a fair hypothesis.
Which led to the next question, could electricity be used to bring us back from the dead?
Interesting. I wonder what the lag was between them discovering electricity and then inventing the electric chair. Because I bet it wasn't very far.
Oh my God, that's so bleak. I mean, we could look into it for the blether if you're interested, but
Sure.
I haven't looked into that for my research. Alessandro Volta.
Alejandro.
Alessandro.
I'm just saying.
Oh. Volta repeated the experiments Galvani had done
Mm-hmm.
and shared... No. He repeated the experiments Galvani had done, but he did them without the frogs.
What did he do them to?
Well, it's tricky. He was basically creating current using like frog substitutes, so just using like chemicals instead.
Oh, okay.
So it's not the same biological component.
Yes.
But from what I understand, Volta invented the electric battery as a result of these experiments because he used brass and zinc discs.
Okay.
Put them on either side of a, quote, piece of brine-soaked pasteboard.
Mm-hmm.
That's the frog.
That's the frog.
Put those together, it works as a battery.
Interesting.
He had 60 discs, layered up like this, ran a wire from each end of the pile of discs and brine-soaked pasteboard, tapped the wires together, and it made a spark.
Oh.
Because it conducts through the whole thing.
That's fun.
It's like instead of a pile of frogs, you just have this big metal pile.
I mean, thank God we figured that out. Otherwise, like, the Teslas would be very problematic.
Would they ribbit?
Yes.
Like, he invented this, and it was called a voltaic pile.
This is sounding very familiar from, like, science lessons in school.
I was hoping it would, because you understand this better than I do. This took a very long time for me to get straight enough to just describe it in a few lines.
This isn't my strong point, though, because it's, like, physics and chemistry.
It's hard to understand. It's tricky. But it's basically a reaction between two metals.
Yes.
That's what I read. Creation of the electric battery. This changed our lives as we know them. This was massive.
Yep.
Advancements like this in how we were able to use electricity changed the world. They changed how everything looked. And I don't think I'm exaggerating by saying that. Because the ability to transport and store electricity changed everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're getting closer to 1818 now. We're beginning to catch up on our professors standing in the darkened anatomy hall.
Yep. Shoving a battery up places.
They didn't do that.
What? No.
I didn't say that.
I must have misremembering.
But I hope it's making sense why I've laid all this out.
Yes. The journey makes complete sense.
Giovanni Aldini was working in the late 1700s. You're not going to like him because he was the first to carry out galvanism experiments on human bodies.
Ooh.
So what Galvani had been doing,
Yep.
he's now doing on people,
Mm-hmm.
dead people. He had been experimenting with oxen, but was given permission to use the bodies of recently executed criminals.
Criminals.
Once again.
They're criminals, so who cares, right?
Now, I'll spare you the more grotesque details, which I read.
Thank you.
Which was not fun.
Yeah.
Aldini applied electricity to the bodies using a massive voltaic pile.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing I just described with all the discs and everything. And he discovered that the same thing happened with these human bodies that happened to Galvani's frogs.
Mm-hmm.
But he learned more because he can't just repeat what's already been done.
So otherwise everyone goes, yes, I know.
Exactly. So he discovered that applying current to different parts of the brain had different outcomes.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
And that electricity makes muscles contract,
Mm-hmm.
which wasn't completely known.
Yes.
So he's doing this to different parts of the brain
Mm-hmm.
and seeing different things happen because different muscles in the criminals' bodies and faces were contracting.
That's interesting.
Which horrified the crowd that had gathered to watch Aldini do this.
Yeah.
Because this was happening in a public place.
Naturally.
Just outside the courthouse in Bologna.
Oh.
Where the executions happened.
Yeah.
So the public had gathered for the execution and stayed to watch the experiments.
Yeah, then there's the after hours show if you're still interested.
It was an absolute spectacle as they were watching just these bodies move.
I mean, that would be, to be fair.
It would be terrifying. Like, this hadn't been done before.
Yeah.
I know that we now have such well accepted images of like Frankenstein.
Mm-hmm.
This idea. It's part of, I don't want to say like popular culture, but I guess it is. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we know what that is and we understand it. They didn't have this.
No. Well, it's similar to the first ever like moving picture they showed of a train, and everyone like ran out the theater to get out the way. It's like that, isn't it? Because you don't understand it, so you're just like, that's a train coming towards me. Bad. Move.
Yeah. I watched BuzzFeed Unsolved did an episode on, I can't remember his name. He's basically the guy who should be credited with inventing moving pictures.
Oh yes, the Frenchman.
Yes, but he disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
He was just disappeared before he could showcase his discovery.
Uh-oh.
And they were talking about, because he had children, and they remembered their father creating these movies. And they were comparing it to, imagine being a kid and having these memories of your dad just flying around the living room. Because he's invented a way to do it and it's never been done. But you have this childhood memory of your dad doing that. Like,
unbelievable.
You can't imagine it.
Yeah. Absolutely unbelievable.
It's going to bother me. I need to get his name. Sorry. Louis Le Prince. That's his name. It would have stuck in my head.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about him in the blether if you're interested, but it's not strictly related to what we're talking about.
Our blether happens over on our Patreon, where we follow the tangents that we mentioned in the episode.
We probably should have said that earlier, eh? Aldini also discovered that galvanism, it did have an effect on the brain, like I was just explaining, but galvanism did next to nothing to the heart.
Oh, interesting.
It didn't do the same thing as it did to the brain. He didn't really know why, but he noticed a difference.
Oh, is it because there's not nerves connected to your heart, and that's what's
we're going to get there,
being
yes.
triggered?
But he didn't know that.
Yes.
Although Aldini did claim to have cured a local man's depression using an early version of electroconvulsive therapy, ECT.
Well, there you go. Maybe the man was depressed and he got shocked. I was like, how do you feel now? I'm like, still depressed. So he got shocked again. It's like, how do you feel now? I feel much better, thank you. I'm just going to go home now. I'm cured. Thank you very much.
Well, I know it was something that came into vogue big time, having like electrotherapy for mental illness. I don't know nearly enough about it to comment anyway. I just know a lot of the time it was quite cruel.
I think all I know is that it can be effective in very, very, very severe cases.
I think it can be, but I think most of the time it's just painful.
But it shouldn't be your go-to.
And unpleasant.
Mhm.
That's the impression I have from the knowledge I've gathered, so I don't really want to comment on it because I don't know enough.
That opinion's shocking.
I don't think so. I think it's widely considered to be quite a frightening form of therapy.
But my pun wouldn't have worked if I hadn't said that.
Yeah,
so.
I know. I'm just trying to make the point. But Aldini claimed that he had done this and he had helped this man.
Yes.
He also discovered that his experiments worked better on the more recently deceased. So he did his experiments right by the courthouse where the executions happened. I'm assuming he got the bodies minutes after they died.
Yep.
But if he repeated the experiments and a few hours had gone by, they had no effect. Galvanism didn't do anything.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
So he figured that out.
Yeah.
In 1803, Aldini came to London and he performed these same experiments in the anatomy halls of several teaching hospitals.
His shocking experiments, yes.
Shocking experiments.
Thank you.
The body of George Forster was experimented on by Aldini in front of members of the Royal College of Surgeons. So this is a big deal. It's making waves. George Forster had just been executed, having been found guilty of murder. And because he had been hanged, he was deemed a perfect specimen for these kinds of experiments.
Yep.
I know it's grim, but there are reasons for this. As opposed to someone having their head chopped off, you know.
Yeah.
Not that happened a whole lot in 1803, but, you know. Many medical professionals were interested in the kind of experiments Aldini was doing because they believed that the work he was doing could lead to cures for epilepsy.
Oh, okay.
Or even in the resuscitation of drowned people.
Oh, interesting.
That was what they were interested in. That was their view, that it could be used as a life-saving treatment to save someone who had drowned. And they decided that being hanged was fairly similar to drowning. So it was the closest they were going to get to trying to test this theory ethically.
Yes.
Instead of just drowning someone.
Well, you know, I wonder if, like, because shocks the brain, they move their face, but if it didn't move other parts of the body because they'd had their necks broken.
Possibly.
So they were paralyzed, potentially.
There's a good chance. I don't see, depending on the blockage, I don't see why that wouldn't be the case.
Because I don't really understand paralysis, but I assume it's because the nerves get broken that connect.
Broken or like cut off, like pinched, I think.
Yeah.
If they're just blocked, like if you have something pressing against the nerve, that can do the same as if the nerve was broken, I believe. But I am not a doctor.
You're not a doctor?
I'm sorry. I know you married me for my doctorate. Well, I don't have one.
For those doctor dollars.
Which I also don't have. Reports of the experiments in the Times that they did on Forster said, quote, "On the first application of the process to the face, the jaw of the deceased criminal began to quiver, and the adjoining muscles were horribly contorted, and one eye actually opened. In the subsequent part of the process, the right hand was raised and clenched, and the legs and thighs were set in motion." Unquote.
It's gross to imagine, but even understanding what it is, I'm like, well, yeah, muscles contract, so the limbs move, but it's still just like, whoa.
Yeah, I know. Hence the warning. If you don't like it and you're still here, don't listen anymore. You won't like it.
Get out of here, baby.
Aldini maintained while he was doing these experiments that he wasn't even interested in bringing Forster back to life. Didn't matter to him. Because he maintained that galvanism should be explored as a tool for reviving someone.
Yes.
That's what he wanted the knowledge for. Because if they could save people who had drowned, it would be amazing. And I think the distinction that he makes here is an important one. Because there were lots of people who were greatly opposed to the experiments that he was doing. So to make it clear, this is the good that could come from it.
Yeah.
Might help settle the fears of people who are looking at him going, "You're trying to reanimate the dead.
That's good marketing.
You can't do that."
You can't do that. Stop it.
Now, it was in my research for this episode that I came across Dr. James Graham. who I just want to briefly mention because I thought it was really funny, because he experimented with electricity and became known as a sexologist.
Him and me both. That's why they call me Dr. Love.
Oh my god. It's an absolutely wild story about him and all of his shenanigans. I'm going to put it together for Patreon, I think, because
cool.
it's really funny. It's not strictly related to our story today, other than the fact that he was using electrical therapies to improve people's sex lives in the late 1700s. And kind of seemed to be shilling people at the same time. Like, it was such a strange story, and I was not expecting it in my research for this, and it just doesn't fit. We don't have the time.
We don't have time.
I will put it together, and hopefully we'll have it on Patreon sometime soon.
That sounds like fun.
Right, I thought it was really funny.
Mm-hmm.
But all of that brings us to the start of the 1800s.
Okay.
And to the main crux of our story.
Back to your main point.
Mm-hmm. I like what you did there.
Thank you.
How did we get to Matthew Clydesdale terrifying a theatre full of spectators? That's what we have to figure out.
Yes. We've been through A. How do we get to B?
Yes.
Or not to B?
That is the question. This is free. At the turn of the century, Glasgow had become a major hub.
Mm.
It had been referred to as, quote, second city of the empire, unquote.
Oh.
We're talking British Empire.
Yes.
I know.
I get the import, but...
It made it a very important place to be.
Mm-hmm.
Terrible history.
Yeah.
We're going to get there. The American War of Independence kind of took that title away from Glasgow.
Oh, yeah.
Because Glasgow's wealth had been largely down to people involved in the tobacco trade.
Yes.
Which involves slave labour.
Yes.
So a lot of the big, nice buildings in the middle of Glasgow were paid for with tobacco money on the backs of slave labour.
Yep. Makes things a lot more profitable.
It does, and it's awful.
Yep.
Thankfully, there's some great authors and programmes out there that are educating about Glasgow and Scotland's links to slavery in America. I will try and find the links so we can have them somewhere.
That'd be cool.
In the episode. We've talked about them before in other episodes. But good to know, because that's history.
That's number one.
That's number one. So yeah, when the American Revolution happened, there wasn't really that money anymore.
Yes, it was no longer the place to Glasgow.
I'm so happy.
Thank you.
Well, because the Brits weren't really welcome in America anymore.
Yeah.
Couldn't run their businesses and keep all the money.
Mm-hmm.
So Glasgow became a city of industry, which is probably more in line with the reputation it has today in more modern times as a city of industry. In 1794, the Royal Infirmary opened.
Hooray!
A place we're pretty familiar with because we used to walk past it every day.
Mm-hmm.
Massive building, very grand looking. At least the old parts of it are.
Yep.
Huge, huge, beautiful building.
Very difficult to find your way around if you go in the wrong door.
Oh, impossible. Actually impossible.
Yeah.
Several medical schools popped up in Glasgow around this time to meet the growing demand of people who wanted to enter the medical profession. The Napoleonic Wars were happening in the early 1800s, if you didn't know. So many men were training as army surgeons to help with the war effort.
Yep.
So there's a huge demand. Glasgow University had a medical school, which included an anatomy department. Like I said way back at the beginning. There was the College Street School, which was private, and on College Street, hence the name, which is opposite the Aldi that's on Glasgow High Street now.
Oh, wow.
That little street is College Street.
Oh.
So now we're getting into the portion of the episode where Kieran and I know this area intimately.
Yep.
We lived there for a very long time. So yeah, that little road opposite the Aldi
Interesting.
used to have a medical school.
You would have no idea.
No.
Now there's just like some pubs, I think. Oh, that's the only thing of note, anyway.
Well, I actually think it's the edge of some of the like green space that the uni's built
Oh.
because they've got that big new building.
Yeah, okay. Strange.
If you're listening to this doesn't mean nearly as much to you. I apologise. We know it quite well. So there was College Street School and there was Anderson's College, which was also called the Andersonian Institute.
That is familiar.
Yes, it is. Because there's the Anderson building at Strathclyde.
Yeah, there is, isn't there? I thought that.
Now, the uneasy relationship between these three medical schools plays a pretty big part in our story.
Mm-hmm.
The College Street School was the most notorious of the three. It ended up with the worst reputation of them all.
That's where the bad boys went.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
All of the medical schools needed cadavers to use for teaching purposes.
Yep.
But rules were in place to ensure that this was done properly.
Well, this leads to problems.
This is a story that we've heard before.
Mm-hmm.
One we've talked about at length, in fact.
Yes, season 1 was, I was going to say Jekyll and Hyde. That's not right.
I know why you said that, though.
Burke and Hare.
Yes. But Burke and Hare... Hold the phone.
Hare.
Hold the phone. No, I just accidentally looked up the strip club. That's not what I meant to do.
What? Sorry?
There's the Burke and Hare strip club in Edinburgh.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So Burke and Hare were operating in 1828. So it's a little bit after
Not that
our
far
story,
after, though.
but we have talked about this problem
Mm-hmm.
before. The schools had changed their methods for teaching anatomy around the turn of the century because they previously the schools had changed their methods a little bit to meet the demands and try and stay competitive.
Mm-hmm.
Because previously they would use one cadaver to teach a whole class. So they would be shown a dissection and they would use it as a teaching tool.
Yep.
But now each student was expected to dissect a body.
Ooh.
Which increased demand.
Yes.
Anatomists were paying good money for bodies for these medical schools, but they had to be in good enough condition to teach with.
Mm-hmm.
And where there's money to be paid, there's always someone who's happy to step in and fill what's required.
Yep.
One anatomist in Glasgow in particular seemed to have an overabundance of cadavers to study. So many that he was selling them to other institutions.
Well, that's handy.
To make a bit of extra money.
Mm-hmm.
Granville Sharp Pattison. He opened the College Street School with another man called Andrew Russell in 1813.
Mm-hmm.
Both had a real passion for anatomy, but College Street School is the one that ended up with the worst reputation.
Oh. See, I was hoping it was going to be more like talking shit, and I was wondering how like doctors like throw shade at each other. Like, oh, I bet they still study humours at that one.
I mean, maybe they did that too.
Oh, the College Street School? They're still doing bloodletting.
God, I hear they have leeches in jars over there.
Yeah.
No.
No.
When I said the bad boys go to College Street School, I meant it.
Yeah.
Pattison developed a group of very dedicated students around 1813,
Mm-hmm.
between 20 and 30 of them, who would do just about anything for him and the furtherment of discovery.
Uh-oh.
They were hugely passionate about anatomy and learning.
We've got a Charles Manson situation brewing.
Kind of. His students would listen in to conversations as they went about the city, listening for people who were bemoaning strange illnesses or talking about their relatives or friends who were unwell with ailments they just couldn't figure out and there was no reason for. Listening especially close to stories of people close to death. And they would bring this information back to Pattison. Rumours circulated that Pattison had a secret dissecting chamber.
Oh, no.
One that was hidden from the public. And this is where he and this group of students would meet. And it was only accessible by a trapdoor.
I mean, it's very cool, if a little grim.
Mm-hmm. This was the rumour. And like all the students who were in this select group had a key and only they could get in.
Mm-hmm.
What was true is that he really would meet up with these students, have secret meetings that weren't open to the public. For the rest, it's kind of iffy. But when they came together and they reported the rumours they'd heard to Pattison, they would find out where the recently deceased people that they'd heard about as they died were buried.
Oh, no.
And then they would go and dig them up.
Ah. See, I thought it was going to be listen out for who's ready to pack it in, and then offer to pay them. To be like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, here's some money if that would help. If they'd like donate and all that kind of thing. And I was like, oh, that's fairly like enterprising. But no.
That would be the better option.
Yeah.
No, they were resurrection men. So
cool name.
It was this kind of activity and these kind of people that led to Burke and Hare having to do what they did. Because remember, they didn't dig anyone up.
No.
They had to find other methods because the graveyards were watched.
Yeah.
And there were lots of things in place to stop people doing what Patterson and his students are doing.
Like the big mort cages.
Yeah, exactly. So this is before Burke and Hare.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of the why for Burke and Hare.
Yeah. They were the OG.
Mm-hmm. In Andy Dugan's book, Raising the Dead, which I leaned on heavily for this episode, he talks about the excursions that Patterson's dedicated students would take.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to read you a little bit from his book, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
His students would hear of these interesting cases, monitor the case until the person died, draw lots to see who was going to perform the gruesome task of procuring the body. Their purpose? To discover the mechanism of whatever interesting ailment had been the cause of death. Go out in a small group, no fewer than 3 and never more than 6, to begin the grisly work. Ramshorn Graveyard, High Church Graveyard. As they grew more audacious and more used to the work, they would scarcely bother to conceal any evidence. One of Glasgow's fashionable restaurants... As they grew more audacious and more used to the work, they would scarcely bother to conceal any evidence. And once they had finished what they were doing, they would go to restaurants and bars, make a lot of noise, and make sure that they were seen.
Ah, I see. I've been here all along.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you.
Mm-hmm. So this is bad.
Not great. There being up to 6 of them makes sense, because I've always thought with these things that like just digging a hole is really exhausting and really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So in the likes of, not the Burke and Hare dug graves, when you thought they did, there's only 2 of them. Like, that is exhausting to try and do that in a small amount of night without anyone catching you. So there being 6 of them kind of makes sense.
But never more than that.
Yeah.
Otherwise they'd be too conspicuous.
Yes.
Naturally, word started getting round the more that they did this.
Yeah.
That graveyards were being looted, but of bodies, not valuables. And no one was happy.
Nope.
There were riots once this knowledge came to the public.
Fair play.
That graveyards were being dug up. The public were demanding that more be done to stop this from happening.
Mm-hmm. Did nobody think, like, Did nobody think, what are they doing with these bodies? Who needs a large amount of bodies? This doesn't make sense. Who around here could have a use for dead bodies?
Well, I think they were doing that, but only the police would be able to do anything. So they're demanding something be done.
Yeah, it's obviously one of those 3.
They want the next step to be followed through. I read that one of Patterson's students was actually shot while raiding a grave.
Damn.
But not by a guard. As word had gotten round and people were panicking about their loved ones, someone had rigged a gun on a grave to protect their relative. And they went to go raid this grave and the gun went off.
Oh, that's enterprising.
So people were taking it very seriously.
Can't entirely blame them.
This was a big no-no. It completely repulsed everyone who heard about it, as you'd expect.
Absolutely.
So as a result of the riots and everyone being very upset, more guards were placed at cemeteries throughout Glasgow, particularly the ones that the College Street boys were frequenting, which were pretty close to the college building.
Yes. I mean, if you're going to carry a body, you don't want to carry it very far, do you?
No. You're certainly not going to get far without being spotted.
It's not as fun as Weekend at Bernie's makes it seem.
No. No, this is not the same. This is not Weekend at Bernie's. 13th or 15th December, 1813. Now, this is the same year that Patterson opened his school. It's not been that long.
Got straight to it.
Yeah. His students were lifting from Ramshorn Cemetery, but it's the usual story of any kind of robbery or heist, I think. They got greedy.
Yeah. You don't get caught, so you get more brazen, you get less careful.
You get greedy.
You get greedy.
They decided to try and take 2 bodies at once on this trip in December, not just the usual one that they would go for.
That is greedy.
And because they weren't as careful as the first few times they lifted bodies,
Mhm.
like you said, they got brazen and confident, they weren't as quiet as they should have been. A policeman was guarding the cemetery that night. I actually read that he was alerted to the disturbance in the graveyard by his wife,
Oh,
who had been walking home along George Street
okay.
and heard voices as she passed the cemetery that was there,
Mm.
Ramshorn Cemetery. So he went to go check it out. He heard the boys from College Street and raised the alarm.
Very good.
He chased them through the cemetery, but the students got away.
You dang kids.
This wasn't the end of it, though. At Tontine Coffee House, which used to be in Trongate, the centre of Glasgow, James Mitchell, the head of the police, came in and announced what had happened, hoping for information. So that the cemetery had been raided, a body had been taken. We need to know who it is. Come forward if you know anything. His story struck a chord with one of the men who was in the coffee house at the same time, because his sister had just been buried in Ramshorn Cemetery. So he got really worried, thinking, what if she's the one that's been taken? Janet McAllister, who was his sister, had been widely considered a beauty and had died suddenly when she was 40.
Okay.
She was the mother of 8 children and was sorely missed by her family. She was very well loved. She'd taken a fall while on holiday in Helensburgh not long before her death, had injured one of her hands and one of her toes. But this wasn't the cause of her death. I believe she died of tuberculosis.
Okay.
But the fact that she injured her hands and toes is important.
Oh, I see. Yep.
Ramshorn Cemetery, which I've referenced a few times now, is still there. It's actually at the back of the Premier Inn on George Square.
I was just thinking that. I was like, oh, we've seen that cemetery.
Yeah.
Out a bedroom window before.
Yeah, that's the cemetery.
Creepy.
So you've seen it without knowing that it's there.
Yeah. Ooh.
It's attached to Blackfriars Church.
Mm-hmm.
It's opposite the Spitfire Cafe. It does a nice coffee. Yeah, that cemetery. That's where they were raiding, and that's where Janet had been buried.
Oh, man. It was when you said walking down George Street and she heard it, I was like, oh, is there a cemetery there? Ugh.
Yes, there is. Right in the centre of town. Janet's family went to Ramshorn Cemetery and, to their horror, discovered that her grave was empty. Janet wasn't there anymore. It had been her body that was stolen. So they went straight to the police to report it, and the hunt began. Obviously, the police knew, but they came to confirm that it was their relative.
Yeah.
Warrants were issued for the police to search, quote, every anatomy room in the city, unquote, since it was extremely clear what her body had been stolen for.
Well, yes.
So you were saying, like, oh, why didn't they know? They did.
They did know. That's good.
But now they could do something about it. Suspicion was pretty firmly on College Street School, since they had a reputation already for, I don't know, just being less ethical. They had a really bad reputation. And muddy footprints from the gravesite seemed to lead back to the premises, like a Scooby-Doo episode.
Yes.
But they were searched the same as everyone else, and the police didn't find anything. So they ordered another search of College Street to try again, which I was thinking it when I was researching. I didn't write it down, but I didn't know how ethical that was, to keep searching until, like, something comes up.
Oh, yeah, that's, I know you've done it.
Yeah, I don't know how ethical that is.
No, that is an interesting one. But
you're trying to make something fit. You're not going off the evidence, because the evidence suggests nothing's there.
Exactly. But they were right.
Well, in this case, yeah, they were, because on their second visit, they found evidence, which they hadn't found the first time. But I just wondered at the time.
That's an interesting one.
How lawful that is. On their second visit, the police found far more than they ever wanted to.
Okay.
Unfortunately, this is pretty dire. Janet was at College Street, and she had been dissected already. but so had lots of other people.
Yes.
And due to the way that they were storing and keeping bits and pieces
Yeah.
at College Street, it was actually really difficult to prove that it was Janet.
Oh, God.
Arranging had to be done under the eye of experts and the police.
Yeah.
So it's pretty grim.
It's not great.
No. And in the end, it was Janet's hand and her foot that proved that she had been taken by College Street.
Mm-hmm.
Since she'd suffered those injuries not long before she died, that distinguished her from the other people.
Yes.
Because she had like broken or crushed her fingers and her toes.
Yeah, that would be recognisable, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Ooh.
Especially because it had happened not long before.
Mm-hmm.
It was her sisters-in-law who identified her in the end, which I think is kind of lovely that they came and they did that.
Yeah.
Patterson was arrested.
Good.
Along with Andrew Russell, who
Good.
was the other co-founder of College Street. I think his students were too, but I don't have names or numbers for them. It was a whole group of them who were arrested. The story of Janet and what happened to her whipped the public into a frenzy because Janet had been a good woman, a godly woman.
Mm-hmm.
She had been beautiful, which engages the public more in a woman's fate than if she isn't beautiful.
Always helps.
And she was a mother.
Ah, yes.
A good woman with all of those traits deserved better than what she got.
Mm-hmm.
So the people who had done this to her deserved to be punished. The public were out for blood.
Okay. I'm just putting something together in my head.
Are you?
Maybe.
I don't know if you are.
I don't know if I am either. Carry on.
Patterson was taken into custody, mainly for his own protection than anything else.
You get torn limb from limb.
Well, the police were concerned that vigilante justice was going to come down on him because people were that angry. They wanted to make sure that he suffered. And for the same reason, Patterson's trial was held in Edinburgh rather than Glasgow, because there was no way he could have a safe, fair trial in the city that now hated him.
Yes.
So, his trial. How do you think it went? Would you like to make some guesses before I get into it?
I imagine it was pretty cut and dry.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I hope it was very cut and dry. But if he had any money, it might not have been. But I'm going to say it was cut and dry. They were like, yeah, obviously.
Is cut and dry a pun?
It was not, actually. So you're going to get hung. That's my guess.
Okay. Well, Patterson's trial marked one of the first times that a body was identified using dental impressions.
Oh.
That hadn't really happened before.
Mm-hmm.
Janet had dentures, and it was explained at the trial that her dentures fit one of the heads that was found at College Street.
Yes.
So the prosecution said this proved it was her because the dental impressions matched. And this hadn't been done in this way before. Now,
pretty good.
It's very interesting to me learning about the first time that these things come about, because dental records have changed over time. It's not just like a dental impression, I think, is like taking a cast of the shape of the teeth. In a similar way, you can take casts of teeth to prove bite marks, but that's not strictly accurate now, but it was taken as accurate years ago, if you follow. This fact was debated by the defence because the dental impressions also seemed to fit other heads. So there was lots of debate back and forth about whether Janet was really there or she wasn't.
Yeah.
Lots of details I'm not going to get into here, the things that they were getting into. But basically, because they seemed to fit multiple sets of teeth, they were arguing, well, you can't prove that that's one person or another because it fits so many.
That is fair. Like, it's not definitive if that's the case.
So the trial went on. Ultimately, Patterson was handed down a not proven verdict.
Oh no. What? That's not guilty.
No, I was hoping you would ask. This is a Scotland specific thing.
Oh, okay.
This doesn't seem to exist anywhere else. Legally, there's no difference between not proven and not guilty. Because in the eyes of the law, you're innocent. It's just a unique verdict.
Interesting.
But it's tricky because it makes you look guilty.
Well, yeah.
So you did it, we just can't prove it,
Yes.
which isn't legal.
No.
It looks like it's going to be abolished, actually. When I was looking into the verdict to try and explain, there's lots of news stories from April last year saying they're going to scrap it because it confuses jurors for that reason. So, well, does this mean they're guilty or not?
Well, yeah.
There are other things that are coming in on the back of it being abolished, because people are worried if you abolish not proven, jurors will tend towards guilty when they would have chosen not proven,
Oh, interesting.
with the sentiment of, oh, well, better safe than sorry.
Yeah.
I would have said not proven, but I'll say guilty,
Ooh. Tricky.
which is a problem.
Yep.
Bit of a tangent there, but there's
Interesting,
things they're doing. They're changing the number of jurors on juries.
Higher.
To,
higher or lower?
Oh, I can't remember. That's really bad.
I don't know what it is currently.
Well, they were basically changing it. I can't remember now.
I've done it again.
Yeah. I did look into it. It's just, I have forgotten. Sorry, bear with me.
Mm-hmm.
So, the proposal, it's all kind of going through and not completely finished yet, but juries would go from 15 to 12.
Okay.
Which is the same as England, that it's 12 jurors. In Scotland, it's 15 at the minute. And at least 8 of the 12 jurors will have to accuse someone of being guilty for it to go through, whereas at the moment it's 8 out of 15. So to balance the worry that more people might go for guilty, you have to have a higher percentage of the jury agreeing that someone is guilty.
That's interesting.
But a lot of this has come through as part of legislation changes to try and improve basically survivors of rape and sexual assault getting the justice that they deserve, because the conviction rate is so low.
Yes.
This is all part of a scheme and legislation being brought in to try and improve the justice system for them specifically.
Well, that's good.
So they're actually trialling having rape cases and sexual assault or sexual violence cases held without a jury at all.
Interesting.
It's a whole thing I looked into for the episode. But Patterson got not proven.
Not proven.
Which is the same as innocent. It's just not being called innocent.
Yeah.
Or not guilty.
Guilty until proven innocent. But you're just proven.
That's the thing, because you hear that and you assume it's, oh, they did it.
Yeah.
They just couldn't prove it. So in the public eye, it's the same as being guilty. But you are legally innocent.
Yes. Interesting. It is its own kind of punishment.
But there should be no punishment because you've been found not guilty. Legally, there can be no punishment because you have been found not guilty.
That's true.
See, it's tricky. That's why they're getting rid of it.
Yeah, I get that.
Bit of a tangent there. I apologise it took so long to find what I needed.
It's all right.
Patterson, not proven, so he was allowed to leave freely, despite it being widely known that even if he himself hadn't dug up Janet's body, which seemed like happened all the time, he rarely, if ever, actually went to dig up the bodies. He sent the students to go do it. He had allowed it to happen and had possibly ordered for it to happen.
Yes.
And benefited from it happening.
Yes. Ugh. Charles Manson.
You keep saying that.
It's quite similar.
Needless to say, his reputation and the reputation of College Street School took a bit of a hit.
Well, it would, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Good. He deserves nothing less.
The judge in Patterson's case, Lord Justice Clerk David Boyle, said, quote, "It is undoubtedly necessary that human bodies be dissected. The purpose of an honourable and useful science renders this indispensable, but it must not be obtained by offending the feelings of individuals and disturbing the repose of the tomb," unquote.
Fair.
Which is fair. I think that's kind of where I align with it.
Yeah, it does need to be done, or it did need to be done, but gotta do it right.
Yeah, you have to do it ethically. Because of the necessity of human dissection... The necessity of human dissection had started long before this. And to try and prevent instances of grave robbing like this, legislation was introduced in 1752. called the Murder Act,
Oh, yes.
and it meant that bodies of executed murderers could be used by anatomists to teach with. This was already in place when Patterson was arrested, but it was there to try and stop what Patterson had been doing, even though it didn't work.
Yeah.
Patterson's ruined reputation meant that when judges handed down death sentences to murderers, they didn't want to allow bodies to be sent to College Street School
Oh, I see.
because it didn't look good.
Yep.
So that's part of what the judge had to do in a capital case. If someone was being sentenced to death, the judge got to decide which medical school the body got sent to under the Murder Act.
Yes. That's interesting. He got the choice.
Yeah.
I suppose how else would you? You're going to have a bidding war, are you? It's a bit unsightly.
Well, yeah, that's why it had to come from them.
Yeah.
But Patterson's antics meant that judges were like, fuck that, I'm not sending I'm not going to look good if I'm sending it that way. So, when Matthew Clydesdale received his death sentence for murder,
Yes.
his body was to be sent to Glasgow University
Yes.
into the care of Professor James Jeffrey,
Okay.
not College Street School.
Not College Street School. Interesting. And then Andrew Ure was at the Anderson
Yes, I will explain.
School.
Yes. Jeffrey was, and that's spelled Geffray. That's why I'm not saying Jeffrey.
Oh, Jeffrey.
Yes. He was a professor of anatomy at Glasgow University and was one of the big names in medicine. He's actually credited with inventing an early version of what we now know as the chainsaw.
Oh, that's surprising. I was like trying to guess, listing through like medical conditions or treatments. The chainsaw.
Yeah. It's not how we, like, you imagine a chainsaw. His didn't look like that.
Yeah.
But he created something like that for medical use.
Ah.
It was quite revolutionary because his version of the chainsaw allowed surgeons to, quote, remove damaged sections of bone in an accurate manner.
Ah.
So they could be really precise and they could, like, reset bones or, like, save people.
Yes.
Far better.
Interesting.
Isn't it?
Did it still go?
I don't think it was running with petrol.
Okay.
No.
That's my main question.
It's your only question.
Yeah, that's my only question. No further comments.
When Jeffrey, learned that he was going to be given the task of dissecting Matthew Clydesdale's body, Jeffrey did something unexpected. He reached across the aisle to the Andersonian Institute, the third medical school in Glasgow, to a younger physician than himself, a man called Andrew Ure.
Interesting.
And offered to have him conduct experiments as part of the dissection.
Oh. So was the Clydesdale guy, was he anyone important? Was he just...
I'm going to tell you.
Oh, okay. I was checking I hadn't missed something.
Well, we might actually have to talk about him next time, because time is ticking along.
Oh, what?
So Jeffrey made his offer to Ure, and this was a really big deal, because the rivalry between the two anatomy schools was massive.
Yeah.
So Ure jumped at the chance. He was really interested in galvanism experiments and learning what they could do for medicine.
So that's the electricity into the body.
Yes.
Interesting.
He had followed the work of Galvani, he was the one who had the frogs, and the work of Volta, who made the battery.
Yep.
And Volta had learned that galvanism didn't really do anything to the heart. And this was one of the main reasons the body didn't reanimate, because galvanism couldn't restart the heart.
Ah. Oh. That's so interesting.
So Ure was really interested in this. And he'd studied the experiments for years. And he had some ideas about what they might have done wrong and what he could do that might yield different results. He felt that he might be able to make the heart beat. He just needed a chance.
Oh. But they're not wrong though, are they? Because the big defibrillators restart hearts using electricity.
Which we're going to talk about later.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of you. But yeah, they're like just like on the cusp.
Yeah, like it seems mental, but they're not wrong. It's just the window is much, much shorter than they think it is.
Right? Ure didn't think that the previous attempts to use galvanism on the heart had used enough power.
Oh, yes.
That was his thought.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd applied the current directly to the muscle of the heart, because
Okay.
your heart's a muscle.
Mm-hmm.
Applied the current directly to the muscle. He wondered if more electricity than had been used before was applied to the main nerve leading to the heart.
Interesting.
That might do it.
Oh.
I hope I'm explaining this okay, because it's been very difficult to put together.
Oh, perfectly okay. He's not going to try and harness lightning, is he?
We'll have to wait and see.
Oh my god.
Ure also had some pretty big problems with Pattison over on College Street.
Oh yeah?
They'd been enemies. They really didn't get on. There was a lot of animosity there. They'd been enemies for a long time, which we'll get into later.
Uh-huh.
But this meant that Ure knew there would be no chance of getting to work with College Street on any kind of experiment.
Oh yeah.
It just wouldn't happen.
Mhm.
So when the opportunity came from Geoffrey from Glasgow Uni, he had to take it.
Mm-hmm.
He had to work with him because it might be the only chance.
Absolutely. Why did he ask? Are we going to get into? So, because if they're kind of rivals, like, why did he want the help?
They were rivals, but they had slightly different specialties. So we'll talk about it a bit now next time, I think. But Geoffrey was the one who carried out the dissection.
Mm-hmm.
Ure did the experiments.
Ah.
They were doing different things. So,
okay.
like, Ure didn't have the expertise, the speciality to dissect a body,
Mm-hmm.
but Geoffrey did.
And for the greater good of science, you would want to get the most out of a body for all your experiments and stuff.
And there was an audience. It was watched.
Of course.
Word gets around that these experiments are going on.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to do things for Geoffrey's reputation too.
Yes. Okay, I understand.
That seems to be the reason behind it, because they were doing slightly different things.
Mm-hmm.
They were doubling up. But, in part because Matthew Clydesdale was the first man to be hanged in Glasgow for 10 years.
Wow.
So you have the legislation coming in that, anatomists can use executed criminals' bodies.
Mm-hmm.
But this was the first one in a decade.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So anatomists would have jumped at the chance to get to work on him because they had experiments they wanted to run.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a big deal. And I think Geoffrey would have known that.
Yeah, okay. That makes a lot of sense.
So you're probably wondering about Matthew Clydesdale by now.
I am.
And why he ended up in the anatomy room of Glasgow Uni.
Yes.
So I'll tell you next time.
Oh, you and your cliffhangers. Oh, I even get to hear it in like an hour and I'm upset.
Any thoughts about the episode? Any questions? Anything you want to share?
Well, I'm also thinking about how like pacemakers use electricity to help control your heart. I don't know the details, but I've had a massive turn thinking about like defibrillators, and that it may change them from like, what are they doing, to, oh, well, they probably made that thing. I'm also wondering how long a body can be dead before like a doctor brings it back. Legally dead, like their heart has stopped, for them to come back and still be okay. Because I think it's just minutes, at most minutes.
I think it depends. It's not very long.
So it can be hours, surely.
But the quality of life certainly depends on how long they've been without oxygen.
Yeah, because it's like oxygen to the brain is a big factor, isn't it?
But different people are different. Like, I think the damage has been different depending on the circumstances for different people.
Yeah.
I know that's a really wishy-washy answer, but I think it varies from person to person.
Yeah. So
you see, this is huge.
Yes, it is, isn't it? Well,
you don't look impressed.
Oh, it's because I don't want to wait.
Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much for joining us again for episode 6.
7.
7?
8. I know it's not episode 8. I believe this is episode 7.
It might be episode 7 then. Yes. Thank you very much for being here. If you enjoyed this episode and you're listening somewhere like Spotify, consider taking a screenshot and sending it to a friend so they can enjoy it too.
We're also about to head over to Patreon and discuss this episode. Kieran has some notes he's been taking.
Mm-hmm.
He's looked very... I don't even know how you've been looking. Perturbed?
Yeah,
Disturbed.
That's fair.
Angry.
Mm-hmm.
Hungry.
I really have to pee currently.
This whole episode.
Yep.
So we're going to discuss his thoughts and feelings. He's going to ask questions of me that I'll probably be able to answer.
Yep, maybe.
And if you're interested, you should come join us on Patreon for that.
We're going to talk more about Not Proven, Louis Le Prince, The Electric Chair, and Escape Plan, the Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone movie.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
So we will see you there. If not, we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.